Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 811. Today we're going to take a look at Purple Haze. This has recently come out from Phalanx Games. And what this game is a Vietnam era war game / narrative / role-playing game. It plays 1 to 4 players. Now I've not played it with more than one, I've only played it solo. And it's kind of billed pretty much as a solo game, even in some of the literature in the different rule books and the campaign books and so on. But what you're going to be doing in this is going through 9 missions. And now you can get more with expansions. But you will be taking a squad of 6 soldiers and be going through all kinds of different missions and things like that. So what's going to happen is you're going to play through a mission book. You're going to open it up and it's going to give you some kind of like narrative backstory. And then you'll be playing on a map of Vietnam, either north or south, kind of depending on the side of the board you flip it on. So you have that map piece of it. And so you've been moving tokens around there, kind of like your squad going through the jungle and whatnot. And that map jungle phase is kind of one part of it where you'll be using up stamina, using up time, trying to beat the clock in a lot of ways. So that's one of the 3 facets of the game. The other facet is in one of those campaign books, because for each mission there's a separate book. And there'll be narrative events and things like that that will be triggered from the map into the book, and you'll be making decisions there. And then once in a while you'll get to the third and final part of the game, which is the combat. And there's another separate board for kind of the tactical grid-based combat there. And then you'll come back to base or come back to town. Some of your soldiers maybe go to the hospital. Some of them may have been eliminated. Some of them may experience severe mental stress and fatigue and so on. And you'll play through all 9 missions. There's no like win or lose necessarily, but your soldiers will sort of like level up in a way and get experience and get different conditions and things like that. And the most important part of it, which I'll mention now and then I'll mention at the end in the review section, because it's not really like part of the rules, but this is how you sort of like win the game, is in the game you take the persona of the squad leader. And so even if that squad leader is killed in action, you'll generate a new one, but you still, if you want, you'll keep the same sort of mentality, the same sort of goal. So you pick one of 3 goals, and then you're going to score at the end of the game based on that, how that is. So maybe you're a guy that's like out for promotion and you just want to see, mission success, and that's all it is, because you want to move up the ranks of the military. That could be one sort of like attitude or goal that you have. Another one is you want to leave no man left behind. You want to make sure that all of your soldiers in your company, you have their best interests at heart, and you're sort of protective of them. And then I can't remember what the third one is off the top of my head, but there's a third one that's kind of like in between that sort of. And so depending on which goal you pick at the beginning of the campaign, you're going to score different things. So if you're being a protective sergeant that is, taking care of the squad, then you're going to keep track of, those that are killed in action, and that kind of thing, and those that have maybe been left behind and so on. So you're going to score those at the end of the game, and that's going to show you how well you did. And so that's kind of your win or loss thing that's going to happen at the very, very, very end. But it also acts as a lens and a way to kind of inform your decisions, because I'll just kind of say this part up front and then we'll get to the mechanics of it. There is replayability here. So there's a narrative thread that goes through all of it, but there are choices that you make. Like I said, the books will present a narrative. And so you say, okay, well, how am I going to react to this? Because sometimes the decision is not just, they're not obvious decisions sometimes. And you're going to say, what do I do here? What do I do here? My squad's really beat up. What do we do? We've only got so much time left. They're exhausted. One of them, we're carrying because he's walking wounded. And so what do we do? Should we just hightail it back to the base? Should we try to see the mission through? How do you react in those type of situations? So you set up yourself a goal. If you choose to adhere to it, then, you kind of can go either way, but then you've got to take into stock, how well are we doing? Are we going to be all killed at the end of this if I don't, make the right decision? So it's interesting. And the rule book does give you some things to sort of say, hey, you could change your mind. and there's some rules for that exactly if you want to kind of change that and then change how the scoring works. But it does it in such a way, I think, presents it in such a nice way in this regard, where it makes sense. It kind of makes logical sense, and that can be part of the story where it's like, you know, I started off with these intentions, but the intentions have shifted. So maybe my score at the end won't be what I want it to be, but it will make narrative sense, and I think the reward of having played the game will still be there because you will see the dichotomy, you'll see the contrast and the shift in the character's, frankly, arc over the course of the campaign. So anyway, I wanted to set that up with those three things that kind of inform your lens, and then we'll get into kind of the nitty gritty here. We'll go down to the table and I kind of give you what I think on the back end, even though I kind of already did a little bit. So let's take a look. Okay, so here I've got this set up. I just kind of rearranged some stuff after the last mission that I've played. But this is kind of what your table is going to look like. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you have your overworld map here. You're going to be moving this figure around, this token, and that's going to be represent your squad over here. We'll take a look there. So that's really a main part of the game. And then in the middle here, you've got some different decks of cards. There's wound cards, boon cards, condition cards, and stuff like that. Here is an encounter deck. So this will have different events that might get generated by moving around out here. And you'll shuffle those up based on the mission. So you can see, like, here's some mission 1 cards and so on. And then in the back here, you got some general cards. So you take all of the cards that are encounters for that mission and then shuffle in a couple of general cards. If you run through that deck, you'll just pull a general card at random there. And then you've got this time track here in the middle, which we'll look at. So this will track your squad's stamina, what time of day it is, because certain actions and stuff like that moving around on the map or coming out of one of the campaign books, which I'll show you, will spend time and stamina. And then you'll need to rest to recover that stamina, but it'll also waste time. And then finally over on the side here, we have kind of the tactical battle map. So when you have a firefight, that's where you'll be. And then down here, we've got our 6 squad members here. So if we take a look, I'm not going to touch these, but you have these various personalities, and there's quite a lot of these here. And you can see they all have like different sort of traits and stats here. You can see on the sides, you know, you've got just all kinds of cool nicknames and everything, all types of people. So each time that you play this, you can see there's a bunch of these. You know, in this case, I have Poster Boy, and he's a courseman, like a medic, and I have Blackjack Ray here. He's the leader, squad leader. You know, next time I play, maybe I reverse those characters and we see how they do. So you can see the main thing is each of these guys has a different special ability, and their stats a little bit different. And these stats come into play when you do a test. So it'll say test your conversation ability, your charisma, so to speak, or your strength, or your intelligence, or your perception, that kind of thing. So that's what this is going to be about. And then you're going to assign, now these are like the level 3 cards here. So you can be infantry level 3, level 4, they'll go up to level 4. Right now down here, all of these guys are actually level 2, about to be level 3, some of them. And so as you get experience points, you'll level up when you go do R&R back at the base. And the first mission, actually, it tells you what supplies that you have in terms of guns and ammo and first aid kits, because, and this is not really a spoiler because it's the very first one, basically you have a crash landed helicopter, you've got to make your way back to base there. So the equipment that you get, you're able to rummage up, which is very nice because it can be very daunting, because at the beginning of each mission, you just lay out your equipment configuration however you want it. Now, again, there's rules for, you know, what people can carry, like can they take basic equipment or some specialist kind of equipment, how many first aid kits, how many little extra sets of ammo, flak jackets, extra rations. So that's a lot to take in, especially if you're just sitting down and play the game. So it's nice that the game in the first scenario says, here's your subset of equipment, take this, distribute it how you've got it. And then at the beginning of each other mission, you can just, you know, distribute it how you want, because the army's giving it to you. You don't have to pay for it. And then that's how it works. And you're always going to have one of these 6 disciplines in here. So you've got a squad leader, radio operator, infantryman, corpsman, engineer, and a scout. You're always going to have those. And so you can see I've got the character cards here, and then each of them's got their equipment underneath them, maybe some special things. Like this one in my last mission, he got a critical wound, so you can see this is a little sign here that says you actually get some experience from it, but he's got to sit out the next mission. So you can see the little bed there. That means you got to sit out a mission. If you get like a flesh wound, this will be like a little bed with 0. It means you don't have to sit out. You already did your hospital time at the R&R. And so what's going to happen is, since this guy has to sit out, I've got to go find me another engineer. And that engineer will be level 1. And then I'll just go and pull a random, I think the rules say draw 3 random characters and then pick one and then put it there. And then this one will come back. Because this one, it was leveled up to level 2. It's going to have more special abilities. Because as you level up these cards, you're going to start to add special abilities on these cards here. So that's kind of a general layout of how things are. Now the game comes with a lot of material here, lots of books. You can see all these books. And this is just the base game. There's no like Kickstarter bonuses or anything. This is the retail copy. And I'll just say up front, it's very well produced. Nice, lots of player aids. And you can kind of live in here. Once you get through the rules, which are a lot, but they're not bad, you can just live in here and you'll be good to go. Then you have a logbook, which you can photocopy. This actually folds out to an 8x10. So you can just photocopy this and then print out as many of these as you want to maybe run different campaigns. And then you can just kind of fold it in half and you got a little logbook there. There you'll keep track of, experience points. As you shuffle everything back into the box, you can just write the names of them down, what kind of, skill set they had, experience points, maybe any conditions that they have. Because as you can see, these wounds, you'll get them, and if they don't kill your soldier, then these are going to go away after some time. If they get a condition, that's going to stay. So like this guy here has a moderate condition. This is kind of like mental stress and fatigue. This you will write down in your logbook. And if you get enough of these, then your soldier is going to basically want to go home, and they're going to go home, and they're no longer going to be in your squad. You'll have to roll up a new character. And the same if they get killed, obviously. You'll have to roll up a new character for that skill set. By roll up, I mean draw 3 and pick one. And then they'll start at level 1. No big deal. It's not like you're not trying to win or lose a war, especially this one. And so that's the idea, is the journey and sort of of your party or your squad as you go through it. And that's really what it's about. So that's how that's going to work, and you're going to write that kind of stuff down on the squad. But you don't have to write down the equipment and everything, because you can just re-get it every time that you roll up a new mission. This guy, though, he has a dog, Bingo the dog. So this is his companion. This offers some stress relief. At the end of each mission, you can remove 2 stress. So you want to write stuff like that down as well. So let's just go through these books quickly. So first off, I'm going to give kudos for this, because there is a Marine handbook. This gives you a quick start guide, little boot camp, and background resources. This is very nice. It's not like a playbook where you might think of like a GMT game where it like plays through some turns, but it's close to that. Like, it gives you some examples of things that happen. It doesn't say like, oh, set it up and then let's play through your first scenario for you or something like that. But it gives you a general idea of what's going on. And this is the kind of thing, and it presents it in such a way. So if you are playing it multiplayer, one of the players can kind of act as the GM or the dungeon master, read the rulebook and have the in-depth knowledge, and then kind of present this in such a way so players kind of have a general gist of what's going on. And it works out very, very well. So it explains again kind of what happens when you travel. You're going to be using stamina, you're going to be using time, you're going to be generating events, and then you're going to be generating narrative things that happen. What are you going to do in the narrative? You're going to be taking tests and stuff like that, making decisions like a choose your own adventure. And then you're going to go here to the tactical squad, tactical board rather, and then, fight that out. And this gives you a general idea of like how the dice system works, which is really neat, and some other things like that, and some like reasons and things like that. And then so it also gives you in the back here some extra literature to go on, also some playlists, some musical playlists and stuff like that, and some other websites, a podcast about this. So there's been some extra care put involved because it is war and is a sensitive subject, as it should be. So there's some good sort of stuff to kind of round out your experience here, which I think is very nice. And just so you know, this is my little old iPad here, and I usually set this up sometimes when I'm soloing, and I just play my YouTube playlists. And I definitely took took their advice there and put some music on, not their playlist, but I have my own playlist for this kind of thing. And yeah, I think it really actually helps. So here's the rule book, no big deal. I will say it's about 50 pages or so. There's some extra pages with glossary and a couple house rules and things like that. Very well laid out. It is a lot. I would say, you know, sit with it over maybe a couple of evenings and get into it. But I think it is very well presented and does a really good job. And it is not small type, right? It's big type. There's pictures, there's illustrations, there's examples. So it's really well done. This is not your typical, you know, GMT style rulebook. I'm not bashing on them. I like plenty of GMT games, but if you're looking to get into this, you like the idea, but you're not a war game person, then you know, it's nice. And then you here have 9 mission books, and let's just grab the first one. Hang on. There we go. So here's the first one. Like you can see, is a helicopter crash, and then you'll move on to patrol, another patrol, and then search, and so on, and all the way down here to finally the Tet offensive. Okay, so these are all going to be kind of laid out the same. And it's funny because it says it presents things in a realistic way, but also in a cinematic way, in a way. And it kind of says, like, you know, for somebody's tour of duty, say for a year or so, they're not going to have 9 things like this happen to them while they're there. Maybe 2 of them, because, you know, I can imagine over the course of 12 months or 18 months, whatever the case may be, it would be kind of a lot for somebody. And so the way these work here is you're going to open this up. That's going to give you some narrative stuff here to read. Not too much, but it's very flavorful. It's full of, I think, appropriately crass language. I don't imagine anybody that would want to play this game would have a problem with that, but I think it makes sense, and it uses not just curse words, but also the lingo and stuff like that. So it's a good kind of engrossing thing in terms of the role-playing part of it. And then it gives you some outlines here. Here's where it gives you your 3 sort of things: getting payback, keeping your men safe, or advancing your career. Getting your payback was the one I forgot. And it gives you kind of the layout here. In this case, like I said, the first mission tells you what you can take. And then it's going to give you different entries here. So you get entry 1, 2. And so during the course of the game, you might flip over different tokens and say, oh, go read entry 7, make a choice, maybe do a test, and so on. And then you're going to get to the point here where it's going to give you a combat layout thing. And you can see it's very iconographic, but it's very simple. And I'll kind of get into it a little bit there as we go through it. But you're going to just play through this, and then you'll get to the end. And on the back of these, I should say, it has a nice little summary of what you're supposed to be doing on the mission. And then in the end, here is the back. So this is kind of like your summary. You get awarded some experience points and some other things. You might have unlocked some keywords by different things that you do in there. So that's all going to be in there. And then, as I said, they also get these player aids. And we're just going to work through these really quickly here, and because this is where you're going to live. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take actions here up here on your map. And this token kind of represents your squad. You might have different goals here. So in your mission book, it'll say when you get to there, you'll look at the beginning and it'll say for number 1, read entry 16 or something. And then this maybe is a base. You might have a crashed helicopter, other things out here. This might be sort of signifying, enemy presence or what you think is enemy presence. Some of these may be face down, so when you encounter them, you won't know what they are. That will trigger different events and entries in there. So what you do on your turn, a basic turn, is you're going to move your squad a space, and you can just move to any adjacent space, or you can bivouac or rest. And so you're basically going to be doing that. You might be calling for an evac, you might be calling for a helicopter, that kind of thing as well. So what you can see here, if we just zoom in a little tighter, and we're zoomed in on all mountains, but you can see the mountain terrain there. But you can see here in the middle of the time track, you can see, okay, if you move into sort of grasslands, you're going to use 1 stamina, whereas mountains is 4 stamina. So here you've got the stamina track, and so you're going to move this thing down however much, based on the amount of endurance you need to kind of hike that terrain. And then also you're going to eat up a certain amount of time. So this will take 15 minutes to go through a little patch of grassland, whereas it takes an hour to go around this mountain. And so you're going to move this little token up here. So for every 15 minutes, whenever you loop around, you're going to bump the hour up and so on. And that top row from 0600 to 1700 is day. And then from 18, basically 6 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning is going to be nighttime. And so during night, it will affect your tests and your dice rolls, whether it's a test in the campaign book or in combat, and it will also affect the enemy's dice rolls as well. So that's how that's going to work. You're going to move around and do that, and then you're going to roll a threat die. The game comes with a couple of threat die because sometimes you might roll more than one. So if you roll a yellow or a red, you're going to trigger an event, and you're going to trigger an encounter draw off the deck. You're also going to adjust your threat. Now if you roll a green, you're going to reduce your threat by 1. If you roll a gray, it's going to stay still. If you roll a yellow, it's going to go up by 1. A red is going to go up by 2. And again, if it's yellow or red, you're going to flip a card off the encounter deck. It's going to give you like just a little bit of a narrative thing to read. It may interact a little bit with the mission book if it's one of the mission encounters. And that's it. So just move, adjust this, and then roll for threat. Now, if you get down here to where you are running out of stamina, you're going to want to start to rest. Now, if you take actions that cost stamina, you're going to roll 2d6 for each extra stamina that you would have to spend. Let's just roll 2d6 there. So that's a 4 and a 6. Now you assign at the beginning these little dice markers here to each of your characters. So that means in this case, the character with the 4 and the 6 would then have to take some damage because they're going to take a little bit of extra fatigue and body breaking from pushing them too far. And that's how things are going to work. So each of these 6 squad members has a dice face assigned to it. Now sometimes when you lose a member, you're going to have to reassign this. So that means it's going to put extra stress on one of your other crew in there. But yeah, that's how this kind of stamina works. And then when you take a rest action, you're going to spend for every 15 minutes, you're going to gain 1 stamina back up. And then every time that this thing loops back to the 00 and we get a new hour, then you're going to roll for threat and then possibly trigger an event. So that's the way that you do that. And it works slightly differently with in the night. And also if you are next to what we call an enemy zone of control here, that will also increase the threat that generates during a rest time, during a bivouac. But that's pretty much how that works. Now, the other part of this, like I said, there's 3 parts. There's the move around the map part, which we just kind of talked about. And then when you have to do a test here, I'll just pull a random one here. So this says if you choose option A, the point man will test kind of their, I don't know what that actually stands for, like they're camping with a difficulty of 2. Success, then this happens, failure, this happens there. So one thing that I didn't mention, and I'm not going to mention all the rules, but you can see I assigned this guy the point man. And you can change that as you take a march action to move around. But then you're going to test, one of his stats here, and I'll just grab this other guy, just so I don't have to mess up my board there. So you can see, okay, I would test this here. If I was testing that, I'd roll 3 dice. If I was testing perception, I'd roll 4, and so on. So the way that a test works, and this goes for pretty much all tests, but a basic test is you're going to roll 3 purple die, and then let's say we had, what did we have, 3 on that for the other thing? So 3 of the kind of skill dice because he had a level 3. So you're going to roll all these together. And then so these are sort of your target numbers, right? So I need a 3, a 5, and a 6. So I got a 3 there, which is 1 success. Remember that was difficulty 2. Now the nice thing is if you roll extras here, they can kind of match against themselves. So this now effectively becomes a purple die, a target, and this will count as a success. So that's 2 successes. Now if I had, in some cases, rolled this counts as 2 by itself because it's a critical die. So sometimes you'll get abilities and things like that which allow you to add a critical die, yellow die, to the pool. Sometimes you get abilities to add extra dice here. So we got that there, which would be useless because it doesn't match with anything, right? And then maybe you add extra purple dice. So it gives you extra targets. There, so in this case now, anytime you roll a 6, this will actually count as 2 successes. But if you didn't roll any 6s outside of the purple, those are useless. Or if I'd rolled this here, that would actually be 4 successes because it's 2 each. So that's what you do. You have a difficulty number, target, you roll these, and then you try to hit it. Now in nighttime, you're going to remove, instead of starting with 3 purple die, you're going to start with 2. And there'll be other abilities and things that will, mess with your dice pool there. So that's how the testing works. Now the last part of the game is the combat. And there you can see the combat board. I just kind of set some things up randomly. You always have, again, tokens matching your different skill sets there. So again, that's the dice, the target dice number that the enemy is looking for to get hits on you. And then this is the enemy here, which I'll just show you, has this dice, which is the number of hit points. This is how much soft cover it comes in with, and then this is some special abilities or dice that it will add to the pool. And so you're going to go back and forth. You can see here's an initiative track here, and the rules will tell you where to put that initiative track. And that's going to be based on a lot of things. Maybe you come in and you were surprised you were ambushed, so the initiative is going to be on the enemy side. Maybe you got the drop on them, it's going to be on your side. Maybe it says, hey, do you have this keyword? Because maybe that means you had foreknowledge. And so it's going to adjust there. Now, not only is the campaign book going to, have an entry to tell you how to set this up in terms of the initiative, but also maybe adds or subtracts different enemies that are available there, and so on. So it's all going to be kind of set up like that. Now, soft cover is these little tokens up there. You can see there's a whole pile of those little 1 pip tokens. Okay, now your guys also can come in with soft cover, and this will be based on their skill set. So this is an infantryman here, and he comes with 2 soft cover. So when you deploy him, you'll put 2 of those tokens underneath his tokens. And what soft cover does is it absorbs hits. So if you get a hit on a guy, it's going to decrease the soft cover. Now there's also hard cover, which are these red things here, and these the rules say to kind of consider it as like, sandbags or some kind of fortification. So these will always absorb 1 hit while your guys are there. So if this guy were to get 3 hits and he had 1 soft cover, 1 hit would be absorbed by the hard cover, the other hit would remove the soft cover, and the next hit would actually damage him, and then we'd put one of these little red dice on him to start counting down his hit points. That's how that works. And same for the soldiers there, except there's little hit point tokens there that you will stack onto one of your soldiers there. And so you're going to take stress and hit points, and you can see here this guy, oops, too much in there. You can see he can take up to 8 stress or 6 damage. And as soon as you hit or go above that, then you're going to discard all of it and then draw either a wound card, which I show you, or a condition card, which I show you, and that can trigger other things. So depending on who has the initiative here, you're going to activate. So if the enemy has the initiative, a couple things will happen. One, see this little track here? Depending on the setup, you may have placed or drawn randomly tokens from this little pile. And these are cool little special abilities. They're not good for you. And they're going to do different things in the first couple of rounds of combat. And so it's going to give the enemy just little special things like, I don't know, sniper fire, artillery fire. Maybe it's negative for the enemy. It's like there's one called foobar where they kind of mess things up. So it kind of decreases their, or increases the initiative that they spend. So the first couple of rounds, sometimes you'll draw ones off of here. Some other tokens will maybe add little things in there. It's like little special abilities, for the enemy. And then what you're going to do is you're going to draw out of this bag. And a bag is not provided, so you can just shuffle these up or draw from a cup. And this is going to tell you what the enemy's kind of like fire action is, their main action. So we can look here, just say, okay, this is going to cost the enemy 6 initiative. It's going to add a purple and a yellow die. And there's always, instead of 3 dice, there's a minimum, or there's a starting value of 2 purple dice. Unless it's nighttime, there's only 1 dice. So let's say it's daytime, it's going to add 2 purple dice, plus this one for 3, plus a crit die, and this little symbol means one of them will go hide and cover. It's not that important, but it's going to cost 6 initiative, so it's going to move back down to you, so next action will be on your side. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at all the dice values here, in addition to that token I just drew, and then add up all the dice of all the soldiers, and then, add all the white or purple or gold dice to the pool. So let's just take this example here. We'll roll these up, pretend it's daytime. So the enemy there is trying to hit 2 and 5. So we got a hit on 5. 6 is going to get peppered, right? Because we got 6. That acts as the target number. 1 and 4 don't match anything, so these are useless. So then, again, you're going to look at your soldiers here that have the little dice thing. So that's the soldier that's getting hit. If I look at this, so the number 2 soldier is getting 2 hits on them. So again, it might remove soft cover or get absorbed by hard cover. So you're going to start to apply damage. Number 5 is going to get 1 hit. Number 6 is going to get 2. That's it. You're just going to distribute the hits to your soldiers that way. And there you go. Then it's going to be your turn. And then we'll just use this guy here as an example. They get somewhat, different than this, but this is kind of the general gist here. So if I'm going to use this machine gun, right? So I can see here, this is going to cost me 6 initiative. I'm going to roll 8 white dice, 2 yellow dice, so 10 dice, plus probably the 2 purple dice to start with. And then it's going to cost me ammo for this case. So I need to use this, I need to spend an ammo or discard the ammo. Not all the weapons do that. So this guy's got, you know, M14, there's no ammo spend there. But you can see this one allows you to do an aim shot. And an aim shot is going to cost you extra initiative, but you can add another purple die in there. But this one doesn't allow, it says no aim shot, so you can't do that. And then this basically says, depending on how far away it was, you may add or remove a purple die. So if it was 2 spaces away, and by spaces, I just mean rows. So this guy could be shooting to this, that's 1, 2, you skip over the middle, 3, 4. And sometimes you can pop smoke and stuff like that in here. That'll impede line of sight. And the hardcover doesn't impede line of sight. You basically draw from the center to your other guy, and then you'll take line of sight penalties for any person that's in the way there or smoke. And basically that is just removing purple die, so the targeting die goes away. So this is, let's say there was no line of sight blocking. Let's say it was 3 spaces away. So instead of 2 purple die, that would give me the benefit of that. If I could have aimed, which I can't with this gun, I could add another purple die. And then say I would roll 8 of these and all that, so you can do all that. And then, so this is also, if you see that, that's like splash damage. So you can distribute damage adjacent to that target. You target a specific soldier, and then, but the way that works is you can apply that, but you can't apply more damage to anybody adjacent than you do to the target. And this has another special ability, so if you trigger, so either an increased die or increased die and splash, it will automatically remove 3 soft cover. So before you apply any damage, 3 soft cover goes away, and then you start to apply damage. Where if it gets too far away, this is 5 away actually, you're gonna lose a purple die. So you just roll these up, and it's very same as a test for the human player. So you got a 3 and a 4, there's a 4, there's a 4, there's a 3, and these are useless here because they don't match anything. So I just have applied whoever I was targeting. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. Okay, and again, you remove soft cover, you know, delete it for hard cover, and then start to apply damage. And that's pretty much what it is there. As you start to remove enemy soldiers, you start to put them on this line here, and you can see the little initiative thing. So that means when they take actions, it's going to cost them more initiative to do it. So if the action said, you know, 6 initiative, and if you killed this many, then it's going to increase the cost there. And then you basically play until either you've wiped them out, they've retreated, which is basically the instant that you have one more than half of the initial setup here, you'll make a die roll, see if it's higher than what's left. If it is, they retreat, and so you've basically won the battle. So that will end it. Or if you get to where you've activated, and when you activate these, you flip them over to show they have activated. So basically activate each of them once. There is one character that will can activate twice. But then it'll be over. You'll just, you don't have to slog it out and kill all of them or wait for all your guys to be killed. Although if you get down to less than 3, then it'll also end. And you get some experience. You might get some boon cards here, which you can then get to spend for like a quick special ability, during that particular mission, or you can save these and convert them to boon points, which could be spent for R&R. And so that's the gist there. So move around here, generate encounters, read events, do tests, trigger combats, have the combats, try to survive. Certain other things will happen, so that you might get some soldiers that get a condition or something like that, or pick up other soldiers that will add to your time, to your travel time. So if you're carrying somebody, every action you do is going to be an extra 15 minutes or an extra 30 minutes in a stamina. And that you'll just put that on this board here to indicate that that's happened. And there's a couple other little tokens and things like that laying around. When you get back to the end of the mission, you're going to have R&R, and it kind of depending on how well you do, you might have town, Da Nang, or the base. You roll dice here on this table to see kind of like in between games what happens. That's where you can spend your boon points to make those not bad or better. And then you're just going to play through all 9 missions. Like I said, you're going to swap these out. Some guys might stay in the hospital, you might lose guys, and you're going to play through all the ways, and then you're going to finally, let's just take a look here at what you might score. So getting payback Keep track of the number of enemies you eliminate in combat. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Keeping your men safe. Keep track of the number of Marines killed in action or breakdown over the campaign. In advancing your career, keep track of the number of experience points the squad leader receives for completing objectives over the course of the campaign. So that's, you're going to choose at the beginning how to score your campaign. And then at the end, you'll resolve that by what you did. But like you said, if your squad leader dies, you can just keep the reason that you chose, maybe switch it up, and just kind of play it narratively how you like. Okay, so that was Purple Haze. I will jump into my 3 pillars of review. The first couple don't make a ton of sense. Usually I talk about player count. I've only played this solo. I think the game is really designed to be solo, although I will say I could see a group having a good time with this. And there's enough going on, and players can control multiple maybe squad members and that kind of thing. I will say it is a little bit overwhelming at first with all of the special abilities you get, because each of your 6 guys will have their own sort of personality trait for the character, the named person that you pick. But then they each are a specialization, and that will have either 1 or 2 special abilities there. So you're looking at like 18 special abilities out the gate. And the specialists are always the same, but the 6 characters and humans, those are going to be different. So as a first time game, it's quite overwhelming from that regard. It's like, oh, I should have did this special ability, or I got to remember to do that. Whereas if you have more players at the table, it'd be a little bit easier that way for people to keep track of. That's really the only, I think, complexity of the game. Although I said the game is moderately complex, but once you kind of get into it, you get into the player aids, everything kind of drives itself. Then it's not so bad. Now, play time was my other one. I was trying to think of my other pillar. The rules, the box is like 90 to 720 minutes. And when I say that, I think they mean if you were to play all 9 campaigns in a row. I would say that 90 seems about right. The first mission that I played was probably 3 hours. But like I said, I was getting to know the rules, trying to get to know all the stuff. I did not go through an exhaustive rules overview there. Trying to get to know all the special abilities, all that stuff. So it took about 3 hours. The next 2 missions was probably 90 minutes. It was very quick. Once you get the hang of it, once you get the hang of the dice system, that kind of stuff, it's very snappy. You move your little guy, you take some time off, you take some stamina off, you roll to see if there's an event. If there is, you draw the card and do what it says. If you trigger something in the mission book, you read the entry and do what it says. You get to the combat, and then, you activate back and forth. It's a chit pull for the enemy, and it's simply just picking one of your guys, and you get 2 actions. I didn't say it in the walkthrough. You get 2 actions, so you can fire and do something else. You can never repeat the action, but you could build up cover. You could, you can do a couple of different things there. Like you've got the radio guy. In the first mission, it's nice because you don't have the radio, so you can't call in their artillery. That's like a slightly more little complex step to do that. You have there's a mortar thing that you can set up, but that's only some missions, that kind of thing. So it's very simple and straightforward, but there is a little bit of like what they used to call in the old days like chrome and extra little stuff on the rules, which makes it nice from a war game perspective. But yeah, so it's not so bad in terms of playtime. Now my last pillar is usually, what is this game like? And it's not like a war game, really. I mean, it very much is. It 100% is. And I'm going to assume it's more like an old game like Ambush, which I've not played. But it feels like it would be something like that. Now, I would kind of say it's kind of like a game which I have and still love, Phantom Leader. So it's kind of like one of those old leader games. And in those games, and all those leader games, they're usually, like jets or helicopters or something else. And there is some personality in there because you do have like little pilots that you keep track of their stress and all that thing. And so having that kind of control over here and sort of managing and dealing with your squad is very similar to that. But this has a cool like narrative campaign that will, go over the course of, 9 games basically. Whereas in those are a little bit more procedurally generated and stuff like that. And I can kind of go back and forth. I kind of am more of a procedurally generated guy. If you've watched the channel at all, not at all. If you've watched it extensively, you will know that. But I mentioned that quite a bit. And that sounds so glib saying it that way. If you've watched the channel a lot, you'll understand that I like procedurally generated stuff. But I really do like this because I think, as I said at the beginning, there is replayability here. And I've seen that through the missions that I've played where I'm like, oh, that's cool. I could have done this other thing and it would have worked out a little differently. And you get a little bit of variety and spice with some of the encounter cards. You know, you can pick the different guys. There's a lot of different characters that you can put in here. You know, there's a little bit of kind of personality to some of their special abilities. And it's kind of very interesting to kind of imagine and see, like, you know, what about if this guy was the leader? Or what if this guy was the scout? You know, how that kind of interaction works. And that's pretty dang cool. And I like how that works. Yeah, so it is kind of in the vein of that. But in terms of like how it's presented, it is so much better presented than any game like that. And I really like this leader games. I think they're fine and they do a great job with what they do. But the level of presentation and production in this thing is really top notch. It is excellent, way above the board. All the things that it adds, and it's just really to the quite a bit of detail. You know, at the beginning I showed you the Marine Handbook. And I think I said Army earlier. It's the Marine Handbook, and the way it gets you into the game there is really cool because it is. You crack open that 55 page rule book, and it's like, hey, holy cow. But that gets you into it, and I like how it presents other ways of kind of looking at the war. It doesn't take a dogmatic approach to it at all. I think it's fairly even-handed, and you know, it gives you music and stuff like that. It puts you in the perspective, and it doesn't shy away from the fact that it's from the American perspective, and it doesn't like over romanticize it or anything dumb like that. But it grounds you. It grounds you in the setting. So I really appreciate the way it does that. And even that sort of, you know, dovetails through the little narrative sections that are in the mission book and like I was saying, the language that they use and the lingo and all that. And the way that things kind of unfold. You know, it does feel cinematic for sure, but it does pull you into certainly like a role-playing kind of aspect. And that's where it kind of like sets itself apart from maybe some more traditional war games, although they do a pretty good job of it too, let's be honest. But it really kind of steeps you in the role-playing side of it, which is really neat. And it kind of feels more like some of these, you know, kind of story-driven Euro games and stuff that have been coming out, like Sleeping Gods or some of those other kind of games that are more storybook Euros. This is like a storybook war game. And I think it does a really good job of keeping you and sort of like pulling you through it because of those three things that you pick at the beginning. That gives you a grounded sort of avatar sense of like who you are and what you're doing and what you're starting to sort of try to play out as things are going along. It's not just because if you didn't have that kind of grounding in it, and then all this other grounding that I'm talking about with the coloring up and the playlists and the, you know, all these different things and some of the ways things are presented, it would become number crunchy. It would become static and dry and strategic, which it still kind of is, you know, to a degree. But if it didn't have that, it would be heartless and emotionless, and that is not the case in this by far. So it's really, really cool in the way that it presents that, and it's one of the best games that I've seen, regardless of if it's a war game or not, with how it presents you and leads you through the story, but still makes it feel, like I said, almost procedural. It feels like you're playing through a game system in that case. You're not just being told a narrative. And that, I think it actually kind of does better than some of these other games, like even Sleeping Gods or Oathsworn and stuff like that I enjoy. Because it feels very choice. I mean, there's choice here. Like, a lot of times it's the illusion of choice. And now, is it going to affect the game? No, because you keep moving through the campaign. But because, again, you chose that goal at the beginning of how you're going to deal with things. And sometimes that when you make your choices, you can't just be dogmatically committed to this is my goal. I'm always going to do things this way because the state of things in the field is going to change how you deal with it. And so because of that, because you have that initial thrust, all of your choices matter. It doesn't matter. You're not going to win. You know, it's not like a fantasy game where you're going to win. Do we beat the dragon or no? Do we rescue the princess or no? It's not something as so, I don't know what the word is, so dumb as that. I mean, I'm not saying it's dumb because I love that stuff, but it matters because you're in the context of like, what does it matter to these people and what they care about? Because maybe they don't want to be there. Maybe they want to be there. You know what I mean? And like, you know what I mean? Like, things aren't always just cut and dry. You know, there's a lot of times when Frodo and Frodo and Sam were taking the thing to Mount Doom and they didn't want to go. You know what I mean? Like, that's part of the story, right? A lot of times in these fantasy games, it's like, oh no, we're going to 100% all the way through. Like, in there are points where they like say, nah, I'm just gonna go home. That's what's going on here, and that's important because that's part of this deal, and so that's not shied away from here. And I think it just makes it a richer storytelling experience by far. And so when you say, does the choice matter, this or that? Yeah, because it's not going to affect the plot, because the plot's not important. Who cares about the plot? It's the character, and what's happening to the character that's important. So that's why the choice is there, and it's real. I mean, what happens to them is real within the scope of the game. So that to me is really cool. Now, I'm just going to wrap up with this. Having said all that, I think this system would be really cool in a fantasy setting. You know, it would be neat to play like an RPG type of thing where these missions and then Now, is it going to have the same weight and sort of gravitas and impact and, you know, momentum that this theme would have? No. Maybe. I mean, you could do it right. I mean, if they just phoned it in, it would be terrible. But you know what I'm saying? So you could have this sort of implication of like how you choose your outcome, how you choose your goal system, how you're going to score it, what the all various factors are. Because, you know, there's parts in here where you're like negotiating with a villager, for example, and you don't know if you can trust them, you don't know if you can get the information, you don't know if they're lying to you, and so you do these little checks and things to do that, and they're going to tell you, oh, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but you know, there's different things that could be happening that the villager's trying to communicate to you. So that is so different. That is so different than like, you know, where's the orc camp? You know what I mean? I'm just totally bashing on fantasy games. That's not what I mean, but I'm trying to illustrate the dichotomy there between the two. And yeah, because of that kind of thing, the momentousness of it, the impact and the heaviness of the decisions, it all works well. It all just syncs up perfectly. So anyway, high recommendation, Purple Haze. Definitely take a look at it. Yeah, thanks.